Hello, and welcome back to the Bibliophile Hour. I'm your host slash cousin, Erica the Bibliophile, and we are on day 6 of Read a Book, Record a Podcast. And this book is a standalone novel. There is no series, there's no other books. It's just a standalone romance novel by Betty Ford, who I love. So let's get into it. Diane Rivers is on a cruise ship. She is getting dressed in her cabin. She is scared and trembling for some reason. She left home at 16, escaping from being preyed on by her mom's multiple partners. Diane has been on her own since, making her way through college waitressing and modeling along with scholarship money. She did acquire two friends along the way, Heather Montgomery, who came from a large family, and Charles Randol, who came from a small, tight, close-knit family. Diane now works at Lawrence, which is a private high school teaching business and computer classes. Diane has followed Charles onto this cruise, and this is who and what she's scared of. Well, scared of his reaction of seeing her, because the last time they spoke, he told her to stay the hell away from him. In the dining room of the cruise, the tables have assigned seating, so Diane is searching for Charles because she asks to be placed at his table, but she only sees a family of 4. Charles is in his cabin having a nightmare about a car accident that he was in. His brakes gave out and he went through a guardrail going down the slope and a tree. He didn't even want to come on the cruise, but his sister Elizabeth and Heather insisted. He agreed, wanting to get away from Diane. His problem with her is she is never without a man on her arm, and he assumes also in her bed. He describes her as a temptress, one that he still longs for. So his problem is they never got together. And I'm going to assume maybe he tried to talk to her and it didn't go his way. Charles comes from a wealthy family, Randol Pharmaceuticals, that his grandfather started. He was expected to take over when his father stepped down, but his heart was in sports. He used to also work at Lawrence as a coach, so when his uncle recently became ill, he had to take over the company. And it's like, isn't that the thing with wealthy families? Whatever happens to acquire the wealth, they just expect the whole family to take over the business, like pass it down. And it's like, this is what you're going to do with your life. And it's like, at some point, you are going to run into that family member that doesn't want to do this. Like, their heart isn't in it, and it has to go to somebody else. Which I always wondered, like, if I had something like that, would I just continue family tradition, or would I follow my heart and do what I really want to do? I think I would follow my heart, because I just can't see myself being unhappy on purpose, if that makes sense. He met Diane 8 years ago at a staff meeting. They tried to date, but quickly figured they were better as friends. Things went sour a year ago when he gave her an ultimatum. Either they date or he will remove himself from her life. And she wanted to remain friends. So they are now no longer friends. Charles goes down to the bar, scoping out the scene, before the bartender sits a drink down in front of him, and he follows to where they are pointing, and it's to Diane. Diane didn't realize she was in love with Charles until she had to go without him. And Charles comes over and just immediately starts going in on her. Where's your man? A woman like you is never without one. So Diane tries to be civil, but Charles is throwing jabs left and right. So he asked her if she followed him because he doesn't believe it's a coincidence she is also on the cruise. Diane wants to be friends again, but Charles tells her to grow up and stay away from him again. And it's like, that has to hurt. And I don't get why, she just, well, I do get, but it's like in situations like these, you should be able to come out and say something, because not saying anything is like even further putting a strain on this already weak relationship. Diane meets a woman by the name of Jeanette, and they spend the day together shopping, talking. And later that night is singles night. So single men, single women who meet up. And Jeanette convinces her to go after her man. So once again, Diane approaches Charles and they dance. And she asks him about the accident, but he doesn't want to talk about that. She brings up that everyone but her was allowed to visit him. So, she's not letting it go. And Diane admits to being afraid before, but she has always cared about him. And he asks, enough to be my woman? And she replies, yes. So now they are taking a chance with each other. And things are getting heated, but Diane puts a stop to it. She's like, I don't want to go too fast, too soon. So let's just take this slow and work our way back to each other. They meet for breakfast the next day, and Jeanette stops by their table, just to say hello and go on about her business. Diane invites her to join them, but she declines, saying she has a date. So when she leaves, Charles makes a comment about her cabin having a revolving door on it. And this upsets Diane because not too long ago, he was making those same comments about her, and they weren't true. So they are traveling to Trinidad, Barbados, and the Dominica, I hope I'm saying that right, are, just a few of the stops they made on the boat. Charles wants Diane to open up more, but the life she has presented to everyone is a lie. She claims to be from Chicago, her parents are divorced, and her dad died when she was younger. She actually moved in with her aunt who took care of her while her mother was off marrying husband number 5 or 6. And none of these are true. Charles asks her what she wants more than anything in the world, and she says that she has everything she wants. And he hopes to be a part of that. He is attempting to take things slow, but there's no denying the underlying sexual tension between them. But Diane always seems to tense up at a certain point. So it's, like if he kisses her or touches her or grabs onto her, she just tenses up and, they have to pull apart from each other. That's because at 32 years old, Diane is still a virgin and she's too afraid to tell Charles. She tells him she wants to be one with him and they have sex, which is so crazy because it's like, how do you go from being afraid to tell him that you're a virgin to, it's happening? And he's stunned to find out about her virginity. So it's just like, they're having sex, and when he meets resistance, he basically demands to know why she didn't tell him. And this is a revelation of the thoughts he's had about her, because he realizes that they weren't true. Yes, he saw her with multiple men, going out on dates, holding hands, whatever, but she never actually did anything with him. With them, not him, with them. And it was kind of just being thrown in his face. He is still demanding an explanation, and Diane doesn't understand his anger. It's like, she's still trying to come to grips with she's finally lost her virginity, and it's to the man that she loves, and he seems upset about that. And, now she's upset. She's like, what did I do that was so terrible? Make love with the one man I care about? And this softens him up, but now she's upset. So he asks why she waited so long, because there were no shortage of men at Central State or Lawrence. And her response is she's never been in love before. So, of course, this comes to an I love you moment, which is always so sweet. But it's just like, why do I have to have an explanation of why I haven't lost it? Like, if I feel like I'm not ready, I'm not doing it. Because it's like so many people, it's become normal for, somewhere between the range of 14 to 16 is the age that you have to lose your virginity, or that is quote unquote normal. And it's just like, if you're not ready, you're not ready. And this is me speaking personally. I didn't lose mine till I was 22. There's nothing wrong with that. If I'm not ready, I'm not giving it up to anybody. And that's just peer pressure of, oh, you should have done this by now. And going back, I wish I would have held on to it a little bit longer. But, whatever. Charles wants a promise of no more secrets between them, And although she's hesitant, Diane agrees. Because she feels like, he's never going to find out that my whole life is a lie. The next morning, Charles wakes up alone, and he's pissed about it. Because it's like, he thought they had got to the point where they were comfortable with each other, and there's no reason for her to have left his cabin. And they meet for breakfast, and Diane is once again, like, she's tensing up and she's nervous. And he just walks away from the table to go get them breakfast because he feels like he's coming on too strong, and she feels like that her attitude is ruining the moment. So they both have thoughts and feelings that are not the truth, but nobody's talking to one another, so they can't establish like what the problem is. And he comes back to the table, with a plate of breakfast for her, and then he sits down and breaks the ice with a story about his recent trip to St. Martin. And they go back to Diane's room so she can grab her purse and they can go sightseeing, and she can do a little shopping. And we are now on day 11 of the cruise, and Charles realizes or makes it known that he has no plans of letting her go. He proposes and Diane accepts. The engagement ring is a heart-shaped ruby surrounded by diamonds. And I thought that was so cute because I always think about my wedding ring and like my engagement ring and what I want it to look like. So to get thoughts of how other people would see their wedding ring as well is pretty dope. I wouldn't want a heart-shaped ring. I think I would want a pear-shaped ring or just a square cut diamond. And it has to be, it's either gold or rose gold. I do not like silver, just plain silver. I don't like it. I want gold. I love gold. Anyway, this is not about me. Diane doesn't think that she can keep Charles satisfied, because we're harping on the fact that her life and the story that she has told them is a lie, and she doesn't feel like she's as sophisticated as he is, or, knows as much about life as he does. So it's just like they are not equally yoked in this situation. And normally they would have to get blood drawn, and the marriage application would take 8 days. But, for them to get married, I guess, while they're on this cruise. But Charles got around all that, so that's not a problem. And they are married in St. Thomas. So she is now Mrs. Charles Randol, aka Diane Randol. And she can't seem to stop worrying about Charles regretting marrying her. And if he ever found out her secrets, it would be embarrassing to him or embarrass him. Diane mentions not being ready to go back to work, and, Charles just casually mentioned, you don't have to if you don't want to. But she quickly shoots that down. She's like, I'm a working woman, and I worked too hard to become a career woman to just turn into a housewife. So they're not doing that. They're on the plane back home. But you know what? Before I even start that's an interesting thing, though. Because, if you think about it, if you work so hard to make a name for yourself, and say you meet a rich person that you love and y'all get married, and their first thing is, if you don't want to work, you don't have to. You can just stay at home. Would you? Would you take that chance? And maybe, go down to part-time or find a different hobby, because not everybody does, but I feel like majority of people, you're working for money. So you're working to get a paycheck. So if money is no longer the concern, would you still be in the profession that you're in? I know I wouldn't, because, I'm not doing my dream job either. So that's another thing. It's if you're doing what you love, do you give it up? Because you no longer have to do it. And I know it's the saying, about doing what you love and not doing it for a paycheck. So if that's your reality, would you give it up? I don't think I could. If I was doing what I really wanted to do with my life, I wouldn't. I wouldn't stop doing that just because money is no longer a concern of mine. Because, the thing I love to do, I'm doing it now, and it's not making me any money. I love to read. I love to talk about books, which is exactly what I'm doing. And if this did start to make me some money, I still wouldn't give it up, because it's I'm doing it now, and it's just because I want to do it, and I love to do it. So, yeah. Anyway, they are on the plane back home, and Diane asks Charles about working at the community center. And, it's just do you have to do it? Because it's in the quote-unquote rougher, or if you want to be technical, well, not technical, but call it what it is, the ghetto part of the neighborhood. And that's what she is concerned about. It's do you have to work there? You don't have to work there. And it's just sis, just because you made it out, now you just leaving people to fiend for themselves. And that's the one thing I hate too, because it's such a double-edged sword. Because you want to get out the hood and you want to make it, and then you want to help people who are still there, but then you have the people in the hood who just want to take what you got, or they completely ignore you, and they want to have that heart, not life. So it's just do you go out to help or don't you? And that's kind of her thing. It's just don't go down there with them hooligans. Uh-oh, not you again. So Charles started a mentoring program for young black men with his fraternity brothers. And it's in the rougher part, like I said, the rougher part of the town. But Charles is not giving up helping because of the location, He's these are young black men that I could help shape and make their lives better. I'm not giving that up just because of where they stay at. That's the whole purpose of going there. Yeah, they live in this part of town, but they can make something out of themselves, and they can leave this part of town. And so her real problem is if he'll even have time for her, because it's he has to work at his family's company. He still coaches, and he has the mentoring program. So it's just when are you ever going to be home? But he promises that they will have time together. So in the limo, they decide to go to his house. And Diane talks about packing up her condo, and Charles just completely takes over and says that his realtor will be putting the house on putting her condo on the market, and hiring someone to pack it up for her. And this upsets her because she is very INDEPENDENT. Do you know what that means? And it's just like, I messed that all up. She wants to make her own choices. It's just like, you're trying to tell me how everything is going to go without asking my input on it. And I don't like that. And so, like for a second, they're just not talking. And he has to tell her, like, baby, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to make life easier for you. I'm not trying to take over. It's just like, if you don't have to worry about it, I can do it, like basically. So there's no reason to be so upset. And she has never been to Charles' home, which is, the family home where he used to live alone, of course, before she came. And his parents have passed, his mother from a stroke, and his father from a broken heart by way of drinking. So the 8-bedroom home has an indoor pool, ground floor library, and a 4-car garage, a recreational room, and separate servant quarters. And so there's also an in-home cook, maid, and manservant, which I find so funny. It's just like a manservant, like Alfred. Charles lets her know that his aunt and sister will probably throw a party, which terrified Diane. She doesn't want to draw attention to herself, and Charles has made mention of her mother and, him wanting to speak to her and talk to her. But Diane brushes him off, like so far she's managed to avoid it. And the truth is, her mother is an alcoholic, drug-using prostitute. And the fact that she's holding this secret in is bothering her so bad that she's swallowing tears next to Charles, like late at night. And Diane had a little brother, Danny. Like at a young age, Diane has been lying about her home life. She was more the parent than the child. Like having to take care of her mom, because of course if she's drunk and on drug binges, who is she parenting? Of course her child is going to have to take care of her. So, she has been cooking and cleaning, and the little bit of normalcy she had is when her mother, Lily, had to go to rehab, and Lily's sister, Jean, took in Diane and Danny, and it was more so to get, the check from the state, but at that point, she just felt like a normal kid. And even though Jean had 5 kids of her own, she did take care of them, though. So Danny got the medical care that he needed. They ate 3 times a day. Diane was doing so well in school. So for a small amount of time, she felt normal. Heather, who is very pregnant, along with her husband, come over in a frenzy because Charles told her over the phone that they got married, but then he quickly hung up. So Heather is ecstatic, they're giving each other hugs, and while they're talking, Charles's sister Elizabeth comes in, and everything is going good until Charles introduces Elizabeth to Diane. And Diane thinks he's joking because just 2 weeks ago, he told her he couldn't stand the sight of Diane. And of course, Diane is humiliated by this, and she wants to cry on the inside, but she has mastered, putting on a front. So Charles defends her, and Liz quickly switches up because when she realizes that she has upset her new sister-in-law and pissed off her brother, she quickly changes her tune and tells Diane that she's so happy to meet her and see her, and, she's very fake. And she attempts to call their aunt and uncle over to celebrate, but Charles kicks everybody out so that he and Diane can enjoy their last little bit of vacation together. And he also tells Elizabeth to call now before she show up. She just can't be popping over to the house. Even though it's their family's home, it's his house. And that hurts her feelings because she was like, that's not my fault. Which I'm kind of on her side because it's like, bro, before you went on this vacation, you was telling me how much you couldn't stand this chick and like how terrible she is, and you come back married, and because you're so happy in love, I'm just supposed to jump on the bandwagon and forget like what you told me. And technically, yes, because it's like, girl, it's not your business. So if your brother is in love and he's married, you can't do nothing about it. But you also got to give her time to like reel that in. Because if that's the last thing I heard and then I come over to see you and you're like, bam, we married. And it's like, bro, stop playing. So Diane and Charles go to her condo to start packing some of her things. And they decide to stay the night. So during talking and packing, he reveals that he's been celibate for 3 years because that's how badly he wanted her. So if he couldn't have her, he wasn't sleeping with anybody. And he tells her, I wanted you so badly, I gave up sex entirely when I couldn't have you. Like, those were his words. And so they're in the middle of kissing and a little bit of foreplay, and her phone rings. And, they're trying to ignore it, thinking the machine will pick it up. But because she hasn't been there, the tape is full and she didn't replace it. So the phone keeps ringing. So at this point, Charles is pissed. So he snatches the phone up and puts it against her ear just so he can stop ringing. And it's a guy named Greg. And, Charles feels like she's taking too long to get off the phone. She ain't told the man she married. So he snatches the phone from her ear and tells Greg to forget her number. So, of course, this causes an argument because Charles wants her to cut off all of her male friends. Because when he told the guy to forget her number, she's like, what are you doing? He is just my friend. And he's telling her, you need to get used to the idea that you're married and you need to let all your friends know you're married and, basically cut them all off. I'm your only friend now, as far as males go. And his jealousy is just so blinding that he goes out to the couch. And her mother also calls asking for money. And Diane tries to set boundaries and tell Lily, no more. But Lily threatens to show up at Lawrence, the school she works at. And she's like, what are what did she say? Like, your fancy friends or your rich friends, like, what will they think when they see me? And she's laughing, like, thinking she has the upper hand. But Diane tells her, you'll lose. Like, without me having a job, I don't get any money. So that means you don't get any money. So either way, you don't get money. But it's more so like she would just be stopping Diane from making any money. Because it's just like, either way it goes, you lose. But Diane agrees to meet her Wednesday. The supposed to be happy couple, the next morning are still upset with each other. And they're barely speaking to each other. So when Charles gets to work, Elizabeth calls herself attempting to apologize to her brother, but he's not having it. He tells her if she can't respect his bride, stay out of their lives. And Elizabeth can't believe it and feels as though he made a mistake by marrying Diane. Because it's just like, what happened to my brother? Where my brother at? Diane and Charles, like, they're both being stubborn. They don't want to give in and apologize to the other. And when she gets home, he has already left for the community center. By the time he makes it home, she is asleep. So this is becoming their routine of not seeing each other are only laying in bed next to each other and not talking. So during the week, Heather surprises her with a bridal shower. And it's just like, that was really nice of her. Diane meets with Lily and she gives her extra money and tells her that she will no longer be able to contact her and will have to wait until Diane contacts her. And Lily once again plays on Diane's terror of people finding out about her, which is her constantly threatening to show up to her school or anywhere of importance to Diane where, of course, people wouldn't want to see her mother being her mother or looking the way she's looking. So Diane and Charles are just acting like complete strangers. They're having nothing to do with each other. And their first time speaking in a week is him forgetting to tell her about the fundraiser that's happening later that night. And then asking her if she can make it. Which of course she does. Because it's like, I'm going to support my husband. That's no problem. But you couldn't remember this a little bit earlier. And Charles has invited one of the young men that he's mentoring and the young man's mother, which is Anita and Jeff Jenkins. And they're getting ready. Anita is also 32 and she's taking care of Jeff on her own. She asked Jeff why he was hanging with his friend Eddie, who seems to be going down the wrong path. But sometimes, like all kids, like even if they're quote unquote good kid, they just have that one bad friend. It doesn't mean they're making the same decisions they are, but that's just their friend. So it's just like, me and him kicking it. That's all it is. Ever been listening to your favorite podcast and think, hey, I want to start my own? Then you need Anchor. It's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First, everyone's favorite word, free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Jeff's mom's name is Athea, not Anita. And that's what threw me off. I'm just like, what? I'm calling this woman by a whole different name. But Diane notices the extra attention that Athea is giving Charles, and she is annoyed because it's just like, bitch, back up off my man. And Charles, in return, is angry about the attention that Diane is getting from Doug, who is someone that Charles works with, and he's like really a friend, but he's annoyed that yet another man is looking at his wife and approaches his wife. So Doug asks her to dance and she accepts. So Charles brings, my notes be messing me up, Athea out on the floor, and they're dancing close so he can hear their conversation. So Charles steps in while they're dancing and she can see that he's angry, and she asks, what's wrong? He says, I hear my wife propositioning another man. What could be wrong? And that's, that is not what she was doing. But she gets emotional because yet again he is judging her. So Charles admits to being jealous, yet again reminding her that she has given him plenty of practice. It's like, I've seen you with man after man, so we've kind of done this song and dance before. And Diane says maybe they just were swept up in the moonlight from the vacation and the candlelight dinners, and they made a mistake. So she steps away from him, and then she asks Athea to accompany her in the bathroom, where she tells Athea that her husband is unavailable, but Doug is. So that's what she was doing. She was asking Doug if he was single or seeing anyone because she wanted to hook him up with Athea so she can get away from her man. So when they get home, Charles wants to talk, but Diane refuses. Like, she goes upstairs like, we said all we had to say out on that dance floor, and I don't feel like talking about it anymore. Which is childish in the end, because it's like, if you felt like y'all made a mistake in getting married, we need to talk about that. Because do I need to be getting divorce papers, or, trying to get an annulment because they only been married for what, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks? It's like, we can get this, nipped and tucked. And after thinking about it, she finds him in the pool and he takes her to bed, And she tells him that sex will solve nothing. And he says it will solve everything. Like, basically, after they have sex, there will be no more problems, which is so foolish. And a common mistake that a lot of people make. It's like, they feel like if you just stop talking and cover up the problems with sex, it'll be okay. And it's just like, you couldn't be more wrong. And so they do have a talk and agree to leave the past in the past. It's like, no more bringing up all the guys that you saw her with, because it's evident that she didn't do anything with them. And it's just like, we are moving forward together as a married couple. And Charles promises to make time for dinner so they can spend a little time together, because Diane, I don't want to say complain, but she brought it up, like, I didn't see you this whole week. But that was also because he stayed out late on purpose to avoid her. And it's just like I said, don't nobody want to talk about nothing. And then, they're upset about the problems. You got to talk about the problems to get through them. Otherwise, they're going to fester and turn into something bigger. And it's time for Diane to meet Charles's aunt and uncle. And she's just so nervous because, like I said, she has the guilt of the lie. And it just, it makes her so tense and wired and just flat out annoying to me. Because it's just like, she's nervous about everything. And it's just like, girl, relax or tell the truth. One or the other. Just get it over with. And Elizabeth is also dreading the dinner because sis does not see it for Diane. And you cannot blame her because, like I said, she's going off what her brother said. She's seen her brother upset multiple times from dealing with Diane, even though she never met Diane. She just knows the name Diane and knows her brother was hurt. So it's just like, you can't expect her to just all of a sudden be happy-go-lucky that Diane is around. And I guess her brother finally got the woman that he wanted. Because it's like, although you wanted her, bro, I've seen you upset. And they always say, if you tell your family problems, even though y'all moved on, the family never will. And that's basically what this is. And so when Diane is asked about her mother, Diane says she's talked to her on the phone while Charles was in the shower. And, he was kind of upset about that answer because, one, that was his first time hearing about it. And, he's been wanting to talk to her mom, and introduce himself. And so Lily shows up while Charles is in the shower one day looking for money. And I'm trying to understand how she found their house, that big old mansion. It's just like, how did you find it? And how you just, strolling up to the door to be able to knock and ask for money. And Diane quickly gives her what's in, they have a petty cash drawer, the wealth, just gives it to her and sends her on her way. And so Jeff is taking a ride with Eddie to a convenience store, but he's supposed to be on his way to the community center. And after waiting too long in the car, he goes in to see Eddie robbing the place. And Eddie gets away, but the owner shoots Jeff. And I'm just like, how do you... You saw him just walk in the store. I'm pretty sure they don't look alike to where the point you shoot the one who didn't do anything. But, of course, we know how this goes. So Charles gets a call about Jeff being shot, and him and Diane rush to the hospital. The store owner claims Jeff had a gun, so he shot him in self-defense. But how did Jeff have a gun when he just walked into the store and the other one ran out? It's just like, I'm pretty sure Eddie and Jeff did not have on the same clothes. Like I said, I'm pretty sure they didn't look like white or Italian, whatever nationality that the store owner is. Basically, it's saying, I saw black, so I shot black. And so Charles goes to the hospital to check on Jeff. Meanwhile, Diane goes to Heather and tells her everything, finally spilling her truth about who she really is, who her mom is, what her real life story is. And she asks for help to get Lily into a rehab center, so she can stop stressing about Lily popping up on her for money for drugs and liquor and whatever else she's doing. So Charles goes to Quinn, who is Heather's husband, to get him to defend Jeff because he is being charged with robbery, which is so crazy. It's like, I get out the car to see what's taking my friend so long, and I go in to see him robbing the store. He gets away, but I not only get shot, I also get charged with robbery. Like, damn. Do you see how unfair life is? Like, really? He ain't doing nothing but just, riding with his friend. And like I said, his mom, Athea was asking him, what are you doing hanging out with him? He's up to no good. But if that's your friend, you don't see it that way. You're just like, oh, my friend is misunderstood, whoop-de-whoop, whatever. But then this happens, and it's like, damn, maybe everybody was right. Maybe I shouldn't have been hanging out with him, which in this case you shouldn't. So Jeff has been refusing all visitors except his mama. And black men love their mama. He won't talk to anyone about the robbery. He's staying mute, even when Quinn tries to question him. And he has given up. No one is going to believe that he didn't do anything wrong. And he's facing jail time and will be in a wheelchair. So Charles goes to see him again and gives him a kick in the butt. So it's just like, are you just going to wallow in self-pity? Or are you going to accept the help that's being given to you? And after getting him to tell his story, Charles goes to Lawrence, to try to get Diane to leave work early. And when he gets there, people say, oh, you just missed her. She's out in the parking lot. So when he gets to the parking lot, he sees her struggling with a woman. So he rushes over and, Diane's secret is out. So he gets Lily into Diane's car and she tries to get her to voluntarily check into the clinic. And of course, Lily refuses. And Charles has to write a check for Lily's back rent, because when they get into her apartment, her stuff is being thrown out, and the landlady tells Diane, she hasn't paid rent in a few months, and basically I'm sick and tired of her. And Lily says that she's lying. She did pay her. She's just trying to get more money, but it's obvious what she took the money and did with it, that she harassed Diane for. And Charles asks her how she knows about the rehab that she's trying to get Lily to go to. And he's even more mad when she says Heather recommended it. So when they get home, Charles, he demands the truth. He's like, I want to know what's going on right now. And so Diane tells him the truth, all about her childhood and what happened. And also Danny, his medical conditions, because we never got into it in the beginning. It was always just he's sick, not what he was sick with, what medication he needed, just he was sick. And he had cystic fibrosis. He died because they couldn't afford the medication he needed. Funny how we had enough money for the drugs Lily needed to maintain her high, though. And although she begs him not to because they can't solve anything apart, Charles leaves, telling her there is no we. There's you and there's me. There has never been a we. And this makes me sad because at first it's just like you're hearing two lost loves finally got together. You know, they stopped bullshitting and got their lives together. And then, I don't know, it seemed to be like a good story, but then you realize how it's been doomed from the start, really. Because it's like he gives her an ultimatum and then she chooses, not to get with him. And then as soon as he's not around anymore, she realizes that she's in love. And then she goes chasing after him and he realizes that he still loves her and he still wants to make a go at it. They get married, realize that there are two different people living two different lives, and she doesn't want to be controlled and taken care of. And then he also realizes that he's been living with a liar. Because it's like, if he asks her any questions about her past, she wasn't honest. She was never honest. So yeah. So I kind of get what he was saying. Like, there's never been a we. There's been you and there's been me. So it's just like, you've been giving me this version you thought I wanted of you when all I wanted was you. And you could have been honest about that. Because it's like, you see the work that he's doing with the community center. He doesn't look down on people because their life is a certain way. So it's like, Diane, girl, you did play yourself. And that's your own hang up. It's like you trying to put it off on other people, but that's not the case. It's like nobody is thinking any less of you because you even went to your other friend and Heather didn't have a problem with it. She helped you find a rehab center to put your mom in. So it's just like, it was your own hang up and it basically cost you your life and the love of your life. So it's been weeks and Charles has moved the majority of his things out of the bedroom and he's still not coming home, which is crazy because it's like, that's his family home, but like, I guess you can keep it, girl. And Diane goes to see Lily, who is now somewhat clean. Like, she's making the steps. She is now going to church and she's going to AA meetings. She has a little job as a clerk in a small bookstore. And, Lily wants to work on their relationship, but Diane is not fully ready to open herself up to her mom yet. It's just like, it sounds good, but I can't trust you. So I'm not even going to set myself up like that. So, this was nice. Having coffee together at your place, that's cool. So, of course, the couple is miserable apart, but they just continue to live separately. Charles is holding on to his anger, and Diane is still holding on to the past in pity. Because when she was talking to Lily, and Lily was telling her she wanted to make the steps towards being better, and Diane just tells her, too little, too late, basically. It's like, I'm grown. I needed you as a kid. I don't need you anymore. So Elizabeth comes over and they have a heart-to-heart. And Elizabeth encourages her to go see Charles. It's like, I can tell that you love my brother and you shouldn't give up. Go get him, tell him to come home, and y'all talk about this. Fight for your husband. Don't just let him go. So Diane decides to go to Charles' hotel room and they talk. So Diane once again tells her story, but now Charles is more open to receive it. Because at first he was just so angry with her not telling him the truth and him basically being the last to know. It's like, you even went to Heather first to help you find the rehab center before coming to me and telling me anything. And I'm your husband. And Diane also tells him that she was almost raped one night, but she managed to fight the man off. And Lily almost died that same night. And if it wasn't for Diane calling for help, she would have died because she was passed out in her bed. And that's when that man traveled to Diane's room and tried to do something to her. But fortunately, she managed to get away. So they promised to work through things together. No more running away, going to other people. We're going to talk to each other. And Charles jokes about getting some baby making practice in, and she lets him know we don't need any practice. So that's right. Our girl is pregnant. Yay! And the book ends with Charles still trying to get Diane to admit that she followed him on the cruise. But she tells him that maybe she'll tell him in another 50 or 60 years. And that is the end of our, standalone romance novel by Betty Ford, which is a good book. I used to love this book as a kid. Like, I've read it multiple times. And it's just like, the moral of this story is communication, not lying, being proud of who you are, and overcoming the obstacles of your past instead of trying to lie and cover them up, and having communication with your partner. It's like when you do have a partner, it's you and your partner against everybody else. So it's just like, if you're not going to be honest on the home front and with your partner, what are you with them for? Anyway, so that is Day 6, Book 6, read a book, record a podcast. And I will see you lovely people tomorrow. Peace and blessings, y'all.